Over the course of the next hour, we're going to deliver you a technical session really trying to take a look at how security for virtualization environments is different from your traditional environment. We're going to do a quick introduction, kind of level set some of the security terminology and best practices for virtualization admins. I'm like many of you where I came from a virtualization background, not a security background, so it's good to kind of understand the different tools, technologies, and strategies for providing security. We're then going to be taking a look at best practices in general for HyperV, then best practices for service providers, including VDI, hosting, and just traditional service providers as well. And then we're going to wrap it up with our different best practices, kind of summarizing these different solutions in your environment. Let's kick it off by doing some quick introductions. I'm Symon Perriman, and I currently run our business development and marketing with Five9. I left Microsoft at the start of 2015 to join this organization because we have some great technologies here doing things which no one else in the market is doing. So I'm pretty passionate about being able to deliver some of the top security and management solutions for HyperV to our customers out here. Also joining me is Alex Karavanov. He's been with us for several years and currently directs our solution engineering team worldwide. As an experienced professional, he's had a lot of real-world hands-on experience, and he's probably worked with many of you out there that are already your customers. Now, Five9 Software, we've actually been around since 2009. We're a company designed and built for HyperV from the ground up, and you'll notice that with all of our solutions. We didn't come from a security background and try to make it fit for HyperV, and we didn't come from a VMware background and try to take those same technologies and make them run on HyperV. We've been building for HyperV from the ground up here. Now, we are based in Chicago with offices worldwide, so we do have global support, and we now have over 50,000 of our customers worldwide supporting us. Now, a lot of our tools and technologies are free tools, and so we do consider our customers all of the people taking advantage of our free VMware to Hyper-V migration tools, as well as some of the free versions of our other products. Now, Five9 Manager is one of our solutions, which is kind of like System Center, but really designed for small to medium businesses that for whatever reason can't justify the move to System Center. So a consolidated tool to manage all of your virtualized resources. The Five9 V2V Easy Converter is our migration tool, allowing you to copy VMware virtual machines over to the Hyper-V platform. But what we're really going to be focused on today is our security best practices and how many of those can be applied using the Five9 Cloud Security product. I was a virtualization guy, and I really wanted to understand how can I go and secure the environment. Well, first, let's kind of talk about some of the different threats here, and what are kind of some of the things that you're going to be most interested about. Now, for a virtualized environment, we really try to think about our core resources being compute, network, and storage. And so in a virtualized environment, when you're running hosts at full capacity, you're trying to make the most out of each host's resources, you really want to be careful about losing access to any of those resources. So denial of memory or CPU, denial of network, denial of data, not being able to access the storage. So these are key considerations in these hosted environments, and we'll talk about best practices to mitigate them later. Now, through your network, you have to keep in mind that to actually access a virtual machine, most of the data is going to have to travel through the virtual machine's network. So that network endpoint is a threat as well, giving your end users, your tenants, people in your environment, the opportunity to download viruses, malware, Trojan horses, or other types of things that cause problem in your environment. Now, the biggest or the most impactful loss that any customer can have is the loss of data. Not only can that really, provide a negative perception of the customer in the industry, as we found out recently, but in many cases, data loss can ruin an entire business. Now, for a lot of people, though, the most common thing you hear about are websites being attacked, denial of service, where we're basically overloading the access or the request to a particular website on a web server. So we want to make sure we can protect against that in a virtualized environment. Now, one thing that you're going to start to hear more and more about, even highlighted by Microsoft's own CEO just 2 weeks ago during the Microsoft keynote, is APTs, Advanced Persistent Threats. And so this is essentially a category of security threats that are ongoing, that are constantly trying to go and attack your infrastructure by spoofing data, by doing brute force, by trying to find exploits in memory or how data is being stored. So these threats, they're kind of tough to find, tough to categorize, but we want to make sure we are able to provide recommendations and solutions for these as well. Now, one thing to keep in mind though is if you're in a highly virtualized environment, it may never be secure. And what we mean by that is there's constantly new threats. You have end users that are in your environment. Maybe they're people that work in your organization, or maybe you're running a public cloud or a hosted cloud. And in that case, you have the public using the environment. You may not trust them. They're constantly downloading emails, downloading attachments, visiting websites through the VMs that may not be ideal. You've got to worry about people bringing storage devices in, plugging in thumb drives. You got to worry about people just transferring different types of file or data across the networks. Even people like help staff at help centers are now vulnerable if they're running in a VDI environment. They have people that are calling in support tickets and sending them files, sample screenshots, but we don't know what else could be attached there. So you've always got to remember that these environments can be impacted pretty easily. Now, another challenge that we see with security as well is the fact that many threats don't get immediately identified. You know, you could have downloaded a file a month ago that had a virus. You could have been scanning that disk, but you never detected it simply because that particular virus didn't have a signature yet. It hadn't been discovered. You also have to worry about viruses that will just suddenly appear based on a certain time, like people had a lot of fear around Y2K, or based on a certain number of incidences. Maybe when a certain number of hosts in the environment are infected, all of a sudden the virus kicks in, it turns on and takes down the infrastructure. So you kind of have to keep in mind that there's a good chance your data center is already infected. Now, we were reading a Gartner report recently printed in the security industry, and they had said the same thing. They said most data centers are already infected. The chance that you have a large virtualized environment with public users that's 100% clean is very unlikely. So keep that in mind. You've always got to try to be proactive here, not just reactive in providing protection. Now, there's a couple of security tools for HyperV that are really focused or optimized for running inside a virtual environment. Now, Firewall is a tool you're probably familiar with. You're able to block specific ports and protocols or allow specific ports and protocols. So this is going to be true inside your virtualized environment. Your VM, based on its role for that particular workload running within the guest operating system, should have different requirements and settings, whether you're running a virtualized SQL server, a virtualized website, or some other type of custom workload. You want to make sure that you have antivirus and anti-malware. Of course, being able to detect for these threats, these problems, before they kick in and cause damage. Now, one way to do that is even filtering the live network traffic once it starts to reach the VMs, and we'll talk a little bit about how that can be achieved later as well. Then the third category is around intrusion detection, intrusion prevention, and you'll hear these often called as IDS for intrusion detection systems or IPS for intrusion prevention. Now, essentially what these systems do is they collect and look at your different traffic patterns through the network. They look for anomalies. So if, for example, you're usually using 20% of your network bandwidth, but all of a sudden there's a spike to 100% and it's all going to one particular server, that could indicate that there's something happening in the network, and we either want to detect that problem and alert the administrator, or we actually want to actively block that problem. Different organizations have different security policies based on how aggressive they want to go and respond to that particular threat. Now, you also have to keep in mind that our focus on today's session is going to be around virtual security, being really able to secure that area from the HyperV host all the way up, along with the east-west traffic from the HyperV host and the virtual machines. But you still need to secure the rest of your data center, the rest of your infrastructure, with traditional physical and software-based security practices. But always keep in mind here that security for these virtualized and cloud environments is going to be different. So let's take a look first at our best practices for HyperV. Now, the first thing to consider here is if you're in a highly virtualized environment, you don't want to be managing endpoint security. And what we mean by that is having to log into each individual VM and enable and manage security there. Now the best way to do this is by using what we call an agentless solution, meaning there's no agents installed inside the VM. So if you look at this diagram here, what we're going to do is kind of draw the data flow of anything that accesses the virtual machine. So we have our physical host and physical network adapters, our VMs and virtual network adapters, and then our virtual switch. Now the virtual switch has to sit between the host and our virtual machines, and anything that wants to go to that VM is going to have to go through our virtual switch. So we could kind of think of this as almost a single point of convergence for all traffic to a VM. So what we've done with Five9 Manager here is we've actually gone and added our own filter inside the HyperV virtual switch. Now the HyperV virtual switch is extensible. So what this means is partners like ourselves, like other different types of network companies, they can actually go put different types of extensions here to go and analyze the traffic, block it, accept it, or forward it. So we're essentially applying all of these security policies at the host level. This means we can choose to accept different types of traffic patterns, or we can choose to block them. We have the ability to actually take a look at that network packet, take a look at things like the IP address protocol, destination, things like that, and control what happens with that package. And so this is essentially the core of the Five9 Cloud Security solution. We sit at that virtual switch level so we can manage security there, not actually having to touch each VM. Now, our second best practice that we have to recommend here is making sure you have a solution designed for Hyper-V. Now, what happened was a couple of years ago, Microsoft released an update. And this update caused anybody that was doing an antivirus check on their VMs to have corruption. This would actually corrupt the virtual machines, because what was happening during the antivirus scan was different blocks of data were being moved around. This caused the corruption with the VM. The VMs can never start again. So Microsoft came out with this KB article, which basically says, don't go and use a solution unless it's designed for Hyper-V. Here's your workaround. Don't scan your VMs, don't scan your virtual disks, don't scan your configuration files, your snapshots, or anything else. So basically, the security alternative is either use a solution for Hyper-V or don't scan and don't have a solution for your VMs. So this wasn't very constructive for a lot of people, caused a lot of confusion. Now, one of the great things about Five9 Cloud Security is we've only designed for Hyper-V. We've only been building for the ground up. So we were one of the few vendors that never had this problem. So make sure that any solution you get has been tested and has been certified for not just Windows Server, but also for Hyper-V. Now, our next best practice is making sure that you keep your security signatures up to date. Now, we'll talk a little bit about how we match security signatures later. But essentially, a security signature is a way to guarantee that a particular virus has been found in your system. Now, if you kind of go down to the architectural level of what actually happens with all the ones and zeros when we do a scan, is that all of these security companies, you know, some of the best in the industry like Kaspersky or ThreatTrack Viper, they basically know the code that gets executed when a particular virus exists. Now, this code is going to be a big collection of ones and zeros. But what they're able to do is do special mapping, run an algorithm that goes and quickly assigns a very, very unique number to each of these particular viruses. It's called a hashing code. Now, what happens is when we're actually doing a scan of the file system, we're going and taking chunks of data off your disk. We're finding that special code, that special hashing algorithm, and we're seeing if we have any matches. So we're basically trying to match pieces of data that are on your hard drives for your VMs to these specific pieces of data that have been identified as threats. Now, always making sure that you keep these signatures up to date is going to be critical to make sure that you can actually find the latest threats, that you're up to date, that these newly discovered problems are going to be identified and closed. And so best way to do this, make sure you have a single centralized database. Now, let's kind of contrast that to what happens with traditional endpoint security. If you're expecting each of your end customers to go and keep their security and their virus and their definitions up to date, you're kind of putting a lot of pressure on your end user, trusting them that they will manage their security. Now, if you're in a VDI environment, for example, and your users simply spin up the workstation for a day, they're probably not going to be spending the time of that day doing patching, making sure their security updates are current. So here's one of the big advantages of using a centralized system. You have centralized heuristics, consistent database, consistent information, so that you're making sure that you scan for the latest issues in the environment. Now, Five9 Cloud Security, we don't try to write our own antivirus definitions either. We leverage Kaspersky, we leverage ThreatTrack. We're actually speaking with several other antivirus vendors to integrate with them as well. And for intrusion detection, we take advantage of Cisco Snort, which is kind of the industry leader in that as well. Now, our next best practice is to try to use a single firewall solution for all virtual machines. Now, one of the interesting data points we heard from Microsoft Ignite is that 1 in 5 HyperV virtual machines are running Linux. Now, that's quite a lot. You know, Linux is a great solution for governments, nonprofit organizations, education institutes, or people that just have special requirements to run certain types of applications on the Linux stack. Now, we wanted to make sure that we can embrace that. But more importantly, if you're a hosting or a service provider and you have maybe some Windows virtual machines because you're doing some VDI, you have some server workloads running Windows Server, and then you have some Linux workloads, you probably don't want to have to manage 3 different firewalls. Now, one of the nice things about being able to have a firewall solution at the host level is you could go and configure these settings and these rules in a single location, and all the virtual machines that run behind it follow those same rules. It does not matter what the guest operating system is. So as we go and intercept all of that traffic, we basically can say, since we're looking at the actual network traffic, what's the protocol? Will I let it pass or not? And it really doesn't matter what type of virtual machine's running at the end of that network. We're agnostic to that guest operating system. So long as HyperV supports it, your agentless solution should support it, just like Five9 does. So if you look at the full list of HyperV guest operating systems, we can see there's quite a few different server workloads, quite a few different client operating systems, and of course, several different Linux and Unix distributions. So using Five9 Cloud Security, though, you could take advantage of a single firewall solution covering every single guest operating system. Now, our next best practice is to make sure that you always protect your virtual networks and avoid any type of security appliance that actually sits on the physical network. Now, this is one of the things that is very unique to virtualized environments, is we have data that can pass between 2 different VMs through what we call the VM's private network. Now, if you kind of think about what the advantage of traditional security or how traditional endpoint security worked, is you would have these physical devices that would sit on the network, and basically all the traffic would get routed through them. Physical firewalls, physical intrusion detection, things like that. And that works with traditional environments where you are actually passing everything through the network. For example, we go past this network traffic from host 1 over to host 2, or from a VM on host 1 to a VM on host 2. That's great. That appliance is going to see the traffic, and it can go and apply the various security policies. But let's think about our virtual networks, where we have traffic going from a host to a VM. We have traffic, from the external to VM, from host to VM, and most importantly, on a private network from VM to VM. Well, that external appliance is never going to go and see it. It's never going to go and apply those security policies. And so what that means is threats can actually spread very easily on private networks if they are not protected. Now remember, one of the big advantages of doing virtualization is this perceived ability to have isolation, to keep those VMs running separately on a host. But if that private network's not protected, well, you can actually have a huge security hole here. And as soon as one VM becomes infected, it could go and infect all of those VMs on that same host. So make sure you have a security solution, again, that will go sit and monitor the virtual switch as well, not just your physical switch. Now our next best practice is doing what we call active protection across the networks. Now remember, what we're able to do here is when we see the traffic actually coming into the host, Well, we are able to go and take a look at that actual network packet. Now, in a network packet that gets received, there's lots of different parts to it. There's the header. That contains things like the name of the protocol, routing information, encapsulation information. Now, based on that header, we can do different things. We can say whether this is a protocol we care about, whether it's accepted, or whether it's not. Now, the second part of all of these network packets is the actual data itself, the payload that comes with that network packet, the information that gets set. So what we want to do, or as a best practice, is be able to read that incoming data, do live matching to antivirus signatures. And if we notice that any of the incoming data includes a virus, and this could be any way, right? This could be someone's downloading 10 files, one of those files has a virus in it. As soon as we can identify that and warn or block, we can guarantee an even higher level of protection. So what kind of happens here is, again, we'll see our network packet come in. We're going to be doing our live scanning, and as soon as we hit that threat, we identify it, we report on it, we're going to try to block it. Now, Five9 Cloud Security, we offer this active protection on our HTTP traffic. Unfortunately, we can't do that to traffic which is encrypted or secured for obvious reasons, right? We can't go and actually look at this data yet. But this is certainly one of our biggest new features, things people are excited about. And we're going to continue to expand the different protocols that we can support in the future. So our next best practice here is being very intelligent around how you go and scan your different disks. Now, the reality is we always need to do scanning. Even if you're doing active protection, there could have been a virus which arrived a week ago, but you never noticed it yet. So even if we're doing this active protection, what we still need to do is make sure we're constantly scanning our disk. There's a couple different ways to do this. Well, one thing you have to keep in mind is when you go and scan a disk, you're basically going through the virtual hard disk of every VM that lives on the host. Now, if you have a very, very dense HyperV host, it's running at full capacity, and then you're going and doing full disk scans, this can actually overwhelm the host. You have to be really careful you don't trigger what is called a scanning storm. Now, think about if you're already running near full capacity, right? You suddenly turn on this scanning, which can sometimes take up 30% of a VM's resources, and you're doing that to all of your VMs simultaneously. Well, this can overload the host. You can actually trigger a denial of service attack for your own resources. It's going to decrease the number of VMs you can run on a host. It's going to kick off all different types of alerts if you have things hooked in for Operations Manager, triggering on different capacity thresholds. And it can even cause live migrations, causing further network disruption. So scanning and how you do it is very important. So what we've done with Five9 is we've got and introduced our own scanning algorithms to make disk scanning much, much faster. Now, the way we do this is what is known as change block tracking. Now, change block tracking isn't a new technology. It's existed a while in the computing industry, but we have a proprietary solution that does this for HyperV for different types of incoming disks. So what essentially happens here is as the data flows to our different VMs and virtual disks, what we're actually doing is keeping track of the different blocks on the disk which have changed. Now, what this means is when we actually go and do a disk scan, instead of having to scan the entire disk, which could be maybe 1 terabyte, all we do is scan the little blocks that have changed, which is maybe 10 megabytes or 100 megabytes or a gigabyte. And so what this does, this allows us to do disk scanning, in some cases 70% faster than other solutions on the market. We don't have to scan the entire disk every time. We're just scanning what has changed since the last time we did a full disk scan. So again, makes these kind of intermediary scans extremely fast. Now, this isn't to say that you still shouldn't scan the entire disk regularly. That's still a best practice, and we'll talk a little more about that shortly as well, how we can optimize with that. And the best way for us to do this is by scheduling tasks such as disk scanning. So what we're trying to do here, right, remember, if you're in a cloud environment, you're going to have to do the same type of operation multiple times. Now, if you're doing this There's going to be human error at some point in time. So what we recommend here is use scheduling tools as much as possible for important security operations. So, this would be making sure that you can scale, making sure that new deployments are immediately and automatically secured, making sure that you're scanning the data, that you're backing it up, that you're replicating it. Kind of all of these standard day-to-day tasks. Now, one recommendation we have for disk scanning, and a way that we can optimize this further, is through scheduling the disk scans. Now, if you remember from the last slide, you don't want to do all of your scanning at once, right? That will cause the scanning storm. That's going to cause other types of problems in the infrastructure. But by scheduling your scans, staggering them, you're going to ensure that you don't overwhelm all of the hosts. So with Five9 Cloud Security, we actually have several different types of job scheduling tools available, allowing you to go and stagger these high resource consuming tasks, such as your disk scans. Now with that, I'm actually going to turn it over to Alex. Alex is going to go and take us through our first demo, giving you kind of a quick tour through Five9 Cloud Security.
So as we're going to start firstly covering Five9 Cloud Security here to give you an understanding of what we do with our product live. So I'm going to start with the virtual firewall biz. Obviously, this is one of the most important parts of hosting and service providers' everyday life security activities. The reason for that is whenever one of your virtual machines, so your customer's virtual machines, gets infected, indeed you are obviously falling in a very, very bad situation when this virtual machine can infect other customers. So the very first thing that we do with our virtual firewall, we allow you to isolate virtual machines from each other completely on the virtual switch level, including external, internal, and private virtual networks. So our firewall actually follows the deny all approach. That means that whenever you enable virtual firewall protection within Five9 Cloud Security, the virtual machine becomes completely isolated from any other virtual machine on the network, on the VLAN or HyperV host, unless there is a specific allow rule for that virtual machine to communicate. So we have a pretty straightforward rules architecture to allow you to create this firewall rules. So we have all virtual machines level that allows you to very quickly create firewall rules for all of your virtual machines under Five9 Cloud Security Protection. Security groups level that allows you to create firewall rules for servers sharing the same role or on a per customer basis. And individual virtual machine rules that allow you to create very flexible scenarios provided that virtual machines can carry different services that may need some different kinds of allow rules. For each of these virtual machines, you obviously get a filtering log, and if you sense that some of the rules is missing, you can actually create that firewall rule out of the detection line. So if you don't have a rule, you just right-click on that and add rule very quickly. The approach we use to create an IP rule is super HyperV efficient. And the reason for that is whenever you create a firewall rule and you base it on certain parameters that are so common in network security world, so you base the rule on obviously local remote ports, remote IP addresses, subnets, and or IP ranges or MAC addresses. So this is what you do with physical appliances on everyday life basis. But what makes Five9 Cloud Security so special when you start creating firewall rules is the way to base these firewall rules on virtual machines themselves. The reason it's so efficient is you don't really have to go through any patches to identify your interface IP address anymore. You just go and select virtual machines from the list, and that's all you need to actually create firewall rules. So obviously we operate virtual machines as units, and this is something that allows you to create firewall rules very quickly. And I can tell you in real life that can save you up to 80% of your time. And this approach also allows you to actually kill the second bird. So you're actually killing two birds with one stone here. The second thing is whenever you create a firewall rule and based on the virtual machine itself, you are using virtual machine identity number, virtual machine ID. And that's absolutely unique. And this is something that allows you to create firewall rule that becomes very robust to any changes happening inside a virtual machine. That means that even if someone intentionally maliciously changes IP address inside a VM, the rule keeps working. So this is a very efficient approach that allows you to quickly create firewall rules and do that more secure. As I'm going to go to antivirus part, let me switch to node 1. So as of antivirus, we are using the incremental approach for full system antivirus scans. Our antivirus is actually split in 3 main modules, and the very first one of them is scheduled agentless antivirus scans of your virtual machines. These scans run on an incremental basis and allow you to reduce time required for full system antivirus scan to something like a couple minutes. Initial full system scan accomplishes during the common amount of time, and all the remaining ones are going on an incremental basis and just take a few minutes. Network traffic scanner allows you to scan virtual machines traffic for viruses, and active protection allows you to scan virtual machines inside in real time. And intrusion detection system allows you to view all the malicious and suspicious network activities happening to your virtual machine and gives you an idea of where the attacks are coming from and what virtual machine is a target, including a brief description for this attack. That was a very brief overview, so I want to give my word back to Symon.
Now, our first and probably our biggest best practice is that you need automatic and immediate protection everywhere. Now, if you think about traditional endpoint security and you're in a large environment, well, there's constantly going to be VMs spinning up. Do you really expect that you're going to have to log into each of them or run security for each of them, install agents? Now, if you kind of think about this, if you actually need to launch the virtual machine to install an agent first, you've immediately opened yourself to security vulnerabilities, because there are all different types of attacks that can happen just when an operating system is getting booted and getting launched. So it's actually impossible to guarantee security if you need to go and install something. So what we recommend here for these dynamic cloud environments is get that automatic and immediate protection. Remember, virtual machines are dynamic. They can suddenly appear on the host. Virtual disks are dynamic. People can add them, copy them, replicate them. Virtual networks are dynamic. People and end users have the ability to deploy them. And even the virtual switches on the host are dynamic as well, created more and more virtual networks. You really want to make sure you have a solution that covers all of this. Now, you certainly can take advantage of scripting technologies, but the best solution, and really the only agentless solution on the market, is Five9 Cloud Security. Now, if you think about what we're doing here, since we're automatically and instantly protecting all the virtual switches, we are automatically and instantly protecting all of the resources running behind those virtual switches, including the VMs, the disks, and the networks. And so what this means is as soon as that virtualized resource gets deployed, it's immediately protected. You never have to worry about waiting to start it up to install anything, or about the security running inside it. Now, if you are really trying to scale up and be a service provider in these large environments, you got to keep in mind that you need an enterprise-class security system. So first of all, you need to make sure that it can be centralized. All of your monitoring, all of your reporting on your virtualized resources. So you may want something that has System Center integration. Five9 Cloud Security has plugins for Virtual Machine Manager, so you can view everything from a single console. You want to make sure that the security can be remote, and so you want to be able to remotely manage everything from a single location. So take advantage of things like PowerShell remoting, RPC, different remoting protocols, so you don't actually have to log in to every host or VM to manage security. You want to make sure that it can scale, so you really want to have a software-based solution. Now, this kind of contrasts to hardware-based solutions, physical devices, where anytime you want to scale up, you got to physically order something, put it in the network, touch it, wire it up, and hope that it can continue to handle these new unexpected dynamic traffic patterns. Whereas if you use a solution that can run inside a virtual machine that's based on software, you can ensure that it gets that automatic and immediate scale. You want to make sure that you can have things such as PowerShell support. So if you need to do advanced scripting or customization, you can do that. You can hook this in to other scripts, other types of tasks. You want to make sure that the solution is highly available. There's no single point of failure. And this could be done through clustering, redundancy, or running services inside a clustered VM. And you want to make it easy for your end users. Offer self-service for security if possible, things such as integrating with Azure Pack. We'll talk a little more about that later as well. So as far as security architecture, we designed our solution to really make sure we followed all of those guidelines. So with Five9 Cloud Security, you have a centralized management server. That's what you see in the middle of the screen here. That can run in a redundant group. It can run standalone. It can run on a VM. It can run in a VM in a cluster, so the management server is highly available. It uses SQL, and actually it can use other types of third-party databases. But if you use SQL, you could take advantage of SQL clustering. We also protect not just the HyperV host, but HyperV clusters as well. We support branch offices, meaning that you can have these cloud management servers in multiple data centers or locations. They can have network separation, but still be able to resynchronize and share new rules when they are able to talk together again. And we offer several different management experiences through a console, PowerShell, Azure Pack, and System Center, giving you all these different options that you would need to manage a large-scale solution. Now, our next best practice that you want to worry about as a hosting service or VDI provider is threats, not just from the outside world, but also inside threats. And not just people attacking your own infrastructure, but people using your infrastructure to attack other people. Now remember, you're in a hosted environment. You're essentially allowing the public to go and rent and play with your hardware. Well, there's naturally going to be security challenges with there. There's naturally going to be people that want to do bad things and create denial of service attacks. So you want to make sure when you're doing monitoring, you're protecting your data both ways, inbounds and outbounds. Now what we do with Five9 Cloud Security is we actually take a look at your standard traffic patterns. We create baselines for you. And if we notice there's an anomaly, for example, all of your VMs are going to one endpoint on the internet, or there's a lot of endpoints on the internet all going to my infrastructure, well, we're going to start to log that. We're going to detect it, and we're going to go and flag an alert saying, hey, you might have a denial of service attack coming up. Now, as a kind of an extension of that, even when you're going and alerting people that there's an attack, you always want to be logging these different types of security events. So what we do with our login format, we write everything into the standard syslog format. This means it can be stored in any database, whether that's SQL or something else. And it also means that we can hook into different types of analytics systems. So when we see these types of alerts, we can trigger not just the Five9 Cloud Security Console, but you can hook into on-premise secure analytics tools like SQL Server reporting services. You can hook into cloud-based analytic tools, things like Azure Operational Insights. So always make sure that you're logging and tracking these security events, because in the event that you did get hacked, you also want to be able to go back and understand what's happened in the environment in the past. Now this is an important one. If you're allowing the public to use your infrastructure, or even some of your own internal users, don't trust them. Don't trust them. You have to assume that this user does not care about security. You should be managing the security updates for them. You should be managing security for them. And you should also make sure that they cannot disable security. Imagine if you've gone through the effort of automatically setting up, some type of security or antivirus in a VDI environment. But your tenant says, I'm annoyed by all of these security warnings and pop-ups. I never want to update my security. I'm just going to turn it off and disable it. Well, that could happen. People disable the security sometimes accidentally. Sometimes they do it deliberately but don't intend to do any harm. And then there's actually people that will disable the security on purpose because they do intend to perform some type of attack. Now, if this is the case, you want to make sure you can centrally view all of your users' actions inside the data center. But more importantly, the only way that you can prevent them from actually disabling security is by not giving them the opportunity to manage their own security. And that's once again by doing security at the host level. If that end user can never actually disable the security or interact with the security settings, then we're guaranteeing that automatic and immediate protection as well. Now you want to also make sure that you're isolating everyone And that's kind of a standard best practice that you're going to see in a virtualized environment, right? Security and isolation. It's critical. The administrator should not be able to access the guest operating system. And in many cases, they're not going to be allowed. So how could somebody even install security if they don't even have the opportunity to log into the VM and do that? You also want to make sure that the VM can't affect the host. So you want to make sure that it's not going to consume too many resources that it negatively impacts the host. You also want to make sure that the VM doesn't impact any other VMs on that host. If it's using up too much of the network resources or bandwidth or memory, that can slow down other VMs on that same host. So as a best practice, you really want to try to throttle all of your resources, provide quality of service or different types of bandwidth management to avoid different denial attacks. Now, the best way, if you're in these hosted environments, to manage security is actually by offering security as a service to your end users, also known as SecAS. Now, this is starting to become more popular as cloud adoption increases. People are really liking Azure. They like the ease of use, the convenience of immediately deploying a virtual machine or a virtual network. But in many cases, people can't actually use Azure. For example, they may need to make sure the data remains in the country, or they may have a bad network connection to the Azure site, or they may not have particular services they want running in their country. So we're seeing a lot of hosting partners and service providers using this technology known as Azure PAC, which is Azure-like services running on your hardware inside your own data center. Now with the Azure PAC, you could basically offer people within your own country or region the ability to use Azure, but running on your hardware so that the data stays safe and within your geographic boundaries. Now, if you go and offer this though, obviously you need to go and acquire a solution like Five9 Cloud Security, so there's a cost to that. But don't look at that as an expense. Look at that as an opportunity. You can now offer improved security. You can make sure your environment's more protected. You can make sure your end users are more protected. But you can also offer this as a service, differentiate between other hosters, and even pass on this expense to your customers. So instead of, maybe charging $20 per virtual machine a month, you can now offer secure virtual machines at $25 per VM per month. In fact, we have one of our hosting partners that say they're going to make more than $500,000 this year just by passing on the security cost to their end users and their end customers. So it's actually an opportunity to actually improve your data center as well as possibly even monetizing from this. Now, as a best practice, you want to make it easy, though. Make it go through the same standard self-service portal. And as a best practice, we recommend using templates. By creating templates that are easy for these end users to understand, it makes managing their security easier. So if they have a SQL VM, they would use the SQL template. A web VM uses the web template. Or you could go and create different types of templates based on different types of compliance or regulatory laws they have to follow, making sure those are honored. Now with that, I'm going to turn it over to Alex. He's going to take us through our second demo, giving us a brief tour of System Center Virtual Machine Manager integration, and then Azure PAC so that we can deliver security as a service.
Five9 Cloud Security can be integrated with System Center Virtual Machine Manager. And the reason we did so is the way we want our customers to optimize their work process. Obviously, when you're managing your HyperV infrastructure, you want to do everything from one single place. And Virtual Machine Manager allows you to do that, and what we want you to be able to do here as well to manage Five9 Cloud Security settings. So we've integrated that with SCVMM, and you can see that all the parameters that you could probably see within a standalone console are available within System Center Virtual Machine Manager plugin. So you can manage virtual machine states, their protection state for virtual firewall IDS or traffic scanner, manage templates, antivirus settings, and all the other parameters of Five9 Cloud Security. Obviously, you can do everything you do with standalone console within SCVMM. We also integrate tightly with virtual machine networking, so you can see our integration to logical switch via Five9 logical switch extension. That's very important to have installed because we have to explicitly tell SCVMM that Five9 Cloud Security filter and switch extension is absolutely compliant with logical switches, and this is where you can see that. from here, I would like to switch to web extension and admin experience. Finding cloud security, Asia-Pac extension is split in two parts, obviously admin portal and tenant portal, and both of these parts bring different types of functionality to provide you the best experience from admin perspective and from tenant perspective. From admin perspective, you can view all the virtual machines of your customers, all the virtual machines that got subscribed to and that use Finding Cloud Security, all the templates, management servers, tenants, virtual machine groups, and protected hosts. Within admin portal, you can create plans, and these plans can be later used for users to subscribe to. And obviously, all you need to do, you just need to include Five9 Cloud Security into the plan. So once it's there, you can track the number of subscriptions, change the limits for every single of these subscriptions, and make sure you can easily monetize Five9 Cloud Security within your infrastructure. Also, Five9 Cloud Security allows you to create templates, security templates for your customers, therefore making their life much easier when they start configuring their firewall rules for virtual machines. This particular example shows you Exchange server, SQL server, web server, templates that can be later assigned to virtual machines. Let's switch to tenant portal. Within a tenant portal, we can see virtual machines that are available for a customer, and you can see that this customer has 3 virtual machines, but only one of them is protected via Five9 Cloud Security. So the process of adding a new virtual machine to protection is very straightforward. You just select New, Add VM, and you enable Five9 Cloud Security protection for that particular virtual machine. So once the list is loaded, customer can choose the virtual machine out of the list and protect it via Five9 Cloud Security. Adding a rule for a virtual machine is also pretty straightforward. It's very consistent to what we have within a standalone console. It just happens within Asia-Pac interface and is very, very straightforward. So adding IP rule by a customer has to go through a very straightforward process of creating a firewall, just 4 steps that allow you to create the rules, and obviously for infrastructure as a service projects or for any customers requiring management of their firewall, this is a very easy way to do so. And obviously this is something that allows you to provide extra services to your customers and charge them extra on for secured virtual machines. On this side, I would like to give my word back to Symon. Symon, I think we're good with Asia-Pac overview here.
All right, so as we kind of wrap things up here, just kind of want to summarize, a lot of these best practices into one of the most critical ones here, and that's just making sure that you maintain compliance requirements. As I hope you've seen over the course of this presentation, security for virtualization and clouds are different. Regulators are now started to require it. You'll see a lot of the latest laws and policies have specific guidelines about cloud and virtualized environments. Your customers expect it. If they're using you as a hosting partner and they're storing sensitive data or information, they expect that you're following the latest compliance laws. But hackers also know how to exploit it. Everybody understands that virtualized environments exist in most data centers and these vulnerabilities. So your best option is really trying to make sure that you're able to protect against it, improving security for you and for your customers. And if you have the opportunity to even monetize from that, why not take advantage of that? That's really one of the unique offerings of our Five9 Cloud Security product. We are the only company on the market that does this approach to agentless security for HyperV. Remember, a single security breach can really ruin your business and your reputation. So security is something that you want to be extremely proactive about. Now, if you are interested in using Five9 Cloud Security, please visit our website or email us sales@five9.com. We do licensing similar to how Microsoft does it, where we're based on per 2 CPUs. So if you had to buy 10 Windows Server licenses, we would require you to buy 10 of our cloud security licenses. But if you're a hosting or service provider, we also offer VM-based charging, where you pay per virtual machine per month, so that you have some flexibility based on different usage patterns and how your tenants are consuming cloud security. Here's a list of great resources we also want to make available. Now, while that's up, I do want to point out a couple things here. We have our Microsoft Virtual Academy course, and this is a 45-minute deep dive just into the Azure Pack solution. And we also have a great white paper that talks about all of these best practices around securely hosting these large environments. Now, after the recording, we're going to go publish this. We're going to put this on YouTube, and we will send you a link not just to this video, but also to the presentation itself, so that you can make sure that you download these and get all of these links. Please, as always, don't hesitate to contact us. You can reach myself, Simon, at 59. Alex is AMK at 59. If you have any technical questions, sales questions, please feel free to reach out to us directly or visit 59.com and contact us through the website. With that, I would also like to thank you all for attending. Certainly hope you learned a lot of new security, best practices, and considerations for hosting, VDI, and service provider environments. This concludes the webinar. Thank you.